This is the Kennebago Muddler. It was invented by Mike Arsenault. And as with all muddlers, they are taken from the muddler that was originated by Don Gapin. This is a slimmed down version of the muddler minnow. I'm tying it on a 10 2x long hook. The recipe in Mike Valla's book, The Founding Flies, says to tie it anywhere from a 6 to a 12. The tail is duck flank, mallard flank, although it can also be tied yellow with a lemon wood duck. And keep that fibers on top of the shank. Come back to my tie-in point. And I'll clip off those butt ends. I have some small bicolor tinsel, tying it with the gold side towards the hook. That way, when I flip to wrap, the gold will show. I am also tying it quite a ways back on the shank of the hook because I need lots of room for the collar and the wing on a muddler, which is going to be clipped deer. I'm going to put a 1-turn whip knot or half hitch and put my thread out on my cradle so that I can use the rotary function on the vise to wrap this body. If I'd used a wider tinsel, it would take a few less wraps, but this will work just fine. So I'm going to do touching wraps all the way down and just have to work around the point of the hook down here. I'll get down to burying the thread. And then I just tilt my tinsel the other direction and wind it back up the hook, covering any gaps that I might have. I'll get my cradle out of the way, and I'm going to hold my tinsel with my right hand while I spool my thread back up on my bobbin. I want a shorter thread to tie that in. 3 wraps over the top. And then a couple wraps, 2 or 3 underneath, just to catch it in. Clip off the extra. The underwing is squirrel, gray squirrel tail, and it's sparse. This is a slimmed down version of a muddler minnow, so just a little bit of tail. And I will size that about the same size, pull out the longer ones in the back, size that to the same size as the tail, and wrap that in. Keep it on top of my shank, and I'll wrap underneath of it. And then I can clip off the butt ends. Just wrap that down. And then the overwing is more duck flank. And that looks like it's probably kind of a sparse, too sparse. I'll go ahead and tie this first little clump in, and then I'll grab some more. I want a little bit more than that. Yeah, that's better. I'll wrap underneath of it. And some of this is you just want it to look good, look right, look like the picture. I have just a small pinch of deer hair that I've stacked that I'm going to use for the collar, and I want that to go all the way around the shank, but I don't want it to flare. And that's been the difficulty of this for me, is getting that tied in without it flaring. So I think if I just do a few light wraps and then move further on up the hook and wrap it in tighter, and then hold it so that it doesn't spin, and then wrap in front, and then I can push back on all of that deer. It's going to flare a little bit because that's what deer does. Not all deer. Bucktail doesn't flare. I've also kind of discovered that at least here in Missouri, with Missouri deer, that the neck hair, back of the neck hair, tends not to flare as much. So I have another clump of deer. This time I've clipped off the tips, and I'll pinch wrap that. And this one I do want to spin. So I'll get that couple of loose wraps, and then I will pull on it, and as I wrap it will spin, and I also want it to flare. I'm using white GSP. The recipe says to use a color that matches whatever color of deer is being used. So I think that means you would have to color the GSP. I don't know if GSP comes in other than black and white. Mine is all white. I don't think I even have any black. No, I do have some black GSP also, but it's more of a floss. So I'm just going to try to pack that together. It looks like I can put another little bit of deer on the front, so I'll grab another pinch, a little bit smaller pinch. I just take that, flare it, pull out all the small stuff from underneath, hold it by the tips, and then I can transfer fingers because I'm right-handed. Scissors don't work in my left hand. Just push that in on top. Do a pinch wrap, so I'm grabbing the thread between my thumb and finger and then pulling down, and then as I wrap it will spin around the hook shank, and that's probably pretty good. And my thread out in front. And then what I will do, this is a small hook, so a pen works okay to kind of push back on that deer. And then I'm just going to do some half hitches. Do a single half hitch to start with, and that will hopefully kind of lock in the deer. And then I'll do a couple of double half hitches for my knot. That way I won't be catching anything in with a whip finisher. Okay. Then I will clip out, or I just take my scissors and push them against my thread. That way I don't cut anything else. Although now I do need to do a lot of cutting. This can be done with scissors or with razor blade. I'm just going to use my scissors here and go back. I don't want to cut the collar, I just want to cut the head. And I want to make kind of a cylinder, although it could be done into a cone shape. Really whatever the tire wants in terms of the shape of the head. Just looking very carefully here on the edge where the butt fibers are compared to the points that are the collar. And I can just turn that and keep trimming. Separate the collar from those shorter, or not shorter, but blunt-ended the butt ends are blunt. They don't have the points on them. So those are the ones that I'm trying to cut out. I'll leave that collar in there. It didn't really go all the way around. I think we can kind of fix that. Really is not a heavy collar on this fly. Just does have some deer hair that leans back along the shank of the hook without flaring too much. That doesn't look too bad. I'm going to be happy with that, I think. There's a couple more of those blunt butt ends. Okay. Don't take out too much collar. A little sparse on the collar on this side, but it's still going to be fine. I don't know that the fish particularly care. I will put a little bit of head cement on my knot. I do use a diluted goop. Just stick a needle in my jar, grab a drop. That'll go on the knot. If I'm concerned about glue in the eye, I can just pass a hackle feather through that eye and clean it out. Mike Arsenault's Kennebago Muddler, remembering that it was Don Gapin who invented the muddler and from whom all other muddlers come.